Hello and welcome to our podcast, The Pet Biz Project, the show which helps pet brands, marketers, business leaders and entrepreneurs to build more meaningful relationships with and sell more effectively to one of Australia's fastest growing consumer groups, pet parents. Each fortnight we chat with a marketing specialist, pet brand or simply hop on ourselves to share with you invaluable insights and inspiration on how to grow your business and more effectively connect with this influential consumer. Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to the next episode of the Pet Biz Project podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of once again of chatting with my fellow co-founder and director of Pet Biz Creatives and co-host of this podcast, Erin Mickey. Today, we are going to be tackling the number one question we get asked by pet brands. How do I build my email list? Because there are so many different ways you can approach building an email list as a small to medium pet brand, it can sometimes feel really overwhelming. And it's not a case of one approach is right for every business. Each business is unique and requires a tailored approach. Because of this, many small business owners that we speak to delay taking any action at all and keep putting off growing their email list. Considering if you are showing up in your audience's email inbox and they are also seeing you on their social media feeds, they are 4 times more likely to purchase from you. You really don't want to be putting off applying some energy to your email marketing strategies. So grab a pen and paper as we're going to be sharing lots of different ideas and strategies with you today so that you can determine which approach will work best for you and your business. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Pet Biz Project podcast. So today I'm back chatting with my business partner and also fellow director of Pet Biz Creatives, Erin. So welcome back, Erin, to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be back.
We are going to be talking about email list building today. So this is going to be a hot topic because I suppose one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this and go on a bit of a deep dive into the importance of building an email list and how you go about doing it is it's probably one of the greatest ways to grow your business, especially when you're a small business and you're just starting out and you want to be able to engage with an audience in a much more effective way than just putting stuff up on social media and hoping that something sticks. An email list is a really good way to build a better relationship. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive. So first of all, we want to look at, I suppose, Erin, do you want to tell us, first of all, why it's so important to build an email list?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, us being email marketing specialists, we're going to say this, aren't we? We're going to say that email marketing is the best way to kind of I mean, let's just get that out of the way. Let's just put that onto the table. But it's not just an insubstantial claim, actually. It's something that, because we obviously have a passion for email marketing, but we wanted to validate that what we believe to be true about the power of email marketing is true. So as part of our recent research project, we actually asked a question to kind of our pet parents, is like, what are the top ways that you actually like to connect with pet brands in the modern age? And the number one answer was visiting their website at 23%, which I think is almost like a given. The second most popular was visiting the physical shop at 18%, but that's not obviously possible for e-commerce pet brands, for example. But then the third most popular answer at 14% was email. So, you know, we were just like, I suppose, like, wipe our brows with a sigh of relief at that response. Yeah. Yeah, we were just like, score. Yeah. Email comes through the top 3. So I think it's just, I suppose I kind of view email marketing as a way to really kind of nurture more deeper and more meaningful relationships with pet parents in a way that isn't as, you know, kind of fleeting in comparison to something like social media, but is something that is kind of like a more constant, consistent relationship and journey that you're taking the pet parents on. So as I mentioned just a second ago, social media, that is obviously another avenue you can go to connect with pet parents, and that is definitely a valid route. But I suppose the risk with using those kind of platforms is that you then don't own that relationship. if there's algorithm updates, if there's just changes to how the app operates, they bring in different kind of rules and regulations. It's like you're at the mercy of whatever their decisions are. Whereas in comparison, if you put all that effort and energy into building your email list, you completely own it. You can essentially, to a degree, do what you want with it. And that's why it's just the effort and energy then that you do funnel into kind of building that relationship. It's just going to pay off tenfold, really.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think one thing that we see, and it's a known statistic in the marketing industry, is that you're 4 times more likely to get a sales conversion if somebody is receiving emails from you as well as seeing you on social media. So, you've got that. Yeah, I agree with you that, getting in front of people, social media is great for that, just for, awareness. But once you've got that awareness from them, get them onto your email list, because that's where the relationship really builds, and that's when they're more likely to actually go and buy from you.
Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of, I suppose, the kind of conversations and how you are interacting with pet parents through email is so vastly different from social media. It's like, just as you were talking, it's like, if, for example, you wanted a pet parent to check out a really cool blog on your website, they're much more likely to be responsive and interactive with that content if you're delivering that kind of call to action via email as opposed to social media. Because I think it's just the whole kind of psychology of the platforms that we're on. If you're on like Instagram, and somebody's like, follow the link in bio and then click this and then click this and then click this to get to my blog, you're much more likely to be like, actually, no, I'm scrolling through social media. I want to stay scrolling through social media, and, kind of dismiss those call to actions. You could have the most amazing kind of resource on your website, but people are more, I think, resistant to, kind of interacting with you in that different capacity. Whereas with email, if you kind of structured it in a way that is inviting, that is interesting, that is relevant and resonates with them, they're much more likely to go, oh yeah, cool, I can, click that link, it will open in a new tab, but it means I haven't lost the conversation that's happening in the email, but I've also accessed this very cool resource that you provided. So just in, I suppose, kind of like a functional capacity, it's just such a different way of interacting, but it's a more potentially accessible way for most people as well. And another thing that I wanted to say about email marketing actually is the kind of, well, I suppose running on from the theme, is the actual style of communication that you have with your email list. It can be so much more kind of specific and personalized, and it's kind of like our buzzword, but meaningful. It's not just a blast out to everyone and anyone. You can actually do things with your email list that means that their specific interests, their specific behaviors, maybe what even type of dog they have, or their dog's name, or their dog's age, their first name when they're opting in. Those kind of details, whilst they can seem quite small at the time of, getting people to opt into your email list, they are such core ingredients to the way that you then go on to communicate with that person, because you can add their first name into communication. You can make it feel like it's one-to-one rather than just a generic email blast to your entire list. You can maybe collect data like their dog or cat's breed, and then tailor what resources and information that you're sending to them to be appropriate and interesting to that specific breed. And it really kind of ties in again to our own research project, is where we found that 60% of pet parents felt stereotyped or pigeonholed by pet brands. And this is just a phenomenal way, in my opinion, to be like, well, actually, we're not stereotyping or pigeonholing you, because we're actually being super, super specific with the way that we're talking to you. We're not wasting your time. We're making sure that what we are communicating and building here between us does have that meaning and value.
Exactly. I think and there's so much you can do these days with email marketing automation that, it's not a case of, once you gather all this data that you're talking about in terms of personalization, you set up those triggers and those flows with your email automation, that it's all set up to be like this ecosystem that operates when a certain person behaves a certain way, that lives in a certain location and has a certain pet, you can be having that communication go to them that is relevant for that person, and just know that it's all operating for you in the background. Like, I know it takes time to get to that point, but that is the power of email marketing, isn't it? Is that having those personalized conversations, but it's actually an automated system that's been built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? a way to make it feel personal, but, you know, not, I suppose, have that kind of, you know, have to manually do it, or that physical labour of I'm having to like write from scratch an email to every individual person on my list. You know, you are still kind of like being efficient with your energy and your efforts, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's, you know, kind of just blanket email to everyone on your list, because that's makes us feel unimportant and undervalued as pet parents, essentially.
Yeah, and I think when we do talk to smaller pet brands, you know, when we say personalization, the straight away people just think, oh, I'm just getting their first name so that I can use the person's first name in the emails. But it goes so much greater than that these days. But I think the one thing I would say in terms of that aspect of personalization is just start small. Start with, you know, if you're just a small business starting out, start small with gathering the first name, knowing where they're located, sort of thing. But as your list size grows, then you can get more complex and more robust with how you're personalizing those things with them. So I suppose that brings us on to, okay, if we've got the why we need to grow our email list and why it's so important, now we want to talk about what, you know, what are the best ways to actually go about creating that email list?
So yeah, just I suppose talking about like what are the best ways to actually then go and build your email list. I suppose the short answer to that particular question is that there's no one single way to go and do this, but we find that a combination of approaches is what is ultimately going to give you the best growth rate, and it's going to be more beneficial in terms of like building the visibility of your brand, building the trust in your brand, and also to effectively and consistently increase those sales. So before we actually kind of go, I suppose, diving into these like combinations of ways that you can build your email list, I think we should first probably start by saying actually don't buy email lists. I don't think many people do this in this day and age.
Oh gosh, worst thing you can do.
Yeah, I'm hoping people don't do it anymore, but I know that it was a very kind of popular thing, I think, when email marketing was first like gaining traction and momentum. But, you know, the trick with these is that they kind of like, if you buy these email lists, look at how many people you're going to have on there, look how popular you're going to be, you're going to just, you know, get so many sales. And, you know, the actual truth of it is that the bulk of the email addresses on these lists are actually inactive. So you're just going to be shouting into the wind, essentially. It's not going to be effective at all. So yeah, I think number one, before we go into anything else, just don't buy email list. It's much better to start from scratch, building that organic relationship with a pet parent and taking them on that journey rather than trying to take, you know, artificial shortcuts. It's just going to pay off in the long run, essentially.
Yeah, and I suppose that also brings us on to the fact that, you know, when you buy an email list, you know, the majority of people, when you send them an email, they're going to unsubscribe from that email. They're going to potentially flag you as spam. So that is going to then go and damage your domain reputation. So when you go to send future emails, all your emails are going to end up in spam folders going forward, because all those email service providers out there now think that, oh, you just sit there and spam people that, you know, you shouldn't be sending emails to. So just that's another reason why don't go buying email lists. You're just going to ruin your reputation with email service providers long term going forward. But another thing that I suppose I wanted to point out in terms of building your email list, and this is probably a good opportunity to do that, is just making sure that when you do start doing email marketing, or you do start to get more involved with email marketing, make sure that with your email system that you're using, whether that's Klaviyo or, you know, ActiveCampaign or MailChimp or whoever you're working with, make sure that you have verified your domain. It's just a really quick, easy step that you do when you're first setting up your account. You go in and you have to verify that this is a legit domain that I own. It represents my business. And by doing that one little step, it really does help long term to make sure your emails do end up in the inbox and not in the spam folder. So just want to make sure, if you're listening to this podcast, write that down. If you haven't done it already, make sure you've verified your domain in your account. Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the most effective ways and methods for small businesses to build their email list, Erin?
There are probably hundreds, but we don't have time to go through hundreds of effective methods. What? So we've kind of like, I suppose, we've got like...
we'll give some.
We'll give some. We'll give like our top 10 or something. I mean, that's a whole other podcast show, isn't it? But yeah, so I suppose there's things that most likely the people listening to this podcast episode right now will be familiar with, but maybe just haven't kind of consciously realised are actually the ways to build email lists, or haven't thought about, you know, the potential benefits for building their own. So I think the first most kind of popular or most prominent way to build an email list is actually having gated content. And this will typically be things like guides, ebooks, like checklists, that kind of thing. But essentially with that kind of gated content, in order to be able to access it, you are requesting for that person to give you typically their first name, last name, email address enabled to access it. And especially if you've done your research and you know your specific niche of pet parent quite well, then that can be incredibly compelling for them. Like if you've got a guide that targets a particular problem or challenge or desire that they have, and essentially to them on the surface it appears free, but in reality there is a transaction in that you are asking for those details and their email address in response for that lead magnet. That is something that, you know, people can feel like is a bit of a no-brainer. But then the second most effective method, which is kind of on a par, I think, in terms of effectiveness, is a financial incentive. And this is something that you definitely see kind of like all over the internet, whether it's kind of like brick and mortar stores or kind of e-commerce shops. And that is things kind of like 10% off your first order, or buy one, get one second half price, or free shipping, and, you know, all those things that just make actually shopping with the brand a bit more desirable and compelling, and be like, oh, well, I was going to potentially shop with you anyway, but if I'm going to get a discount or there's some kind of financial offer attached to signing up to the newsletter first, logically you'd be like, of course I'm going to opt in, why wouldn't I? So that's another way. But I suppose to note on that, with the financial incentives for opting in, we'd always recommend putting a bit of a clock on it, a bit of a stopwatch, just so that it isn't something that people are like, oh, I'm going to opt into the newsletter, I'm going to access this discount, but then I'm just going to leave it sitting there, because ultimately, whilst you have gained the email address, you've not really achieved the full effect of gaining that sale. So, you know, just have like that little bit kind of time pressure attached to whatever financial incentive. And then the third way that you could potentially look at building your email list is gamification and prizes. So this is, again, kind of, I suppose, rewarding pet parents for potentially opting into your list, in that, you know, maybe one newsletter subscriber per month or fortnight, whatever you want to do, receives like some grand prize. Or, you know, if you've got a specific competition, that might be a way to drum up a lot of opt-ins in a short amount of time. But I suppose the thing to be aware of with like things like gamification and prizes is that if you're only doing it as like a one-off, and it's not like every month a newsletter subscriber is picked as a winner, if it's just a short kind of contained contest or competition, then yes, you might receive like tens of hundreds of subscribes, but then you might also receive tens of hundreds unsubscribes after the deadline has passed, because, you know, people are in it for the prize, aren't they, at the end of the day? So if they feel like that opportunity has passed them by, they're like, you know, don't be surprised if you do experience a high degree of unsubscribe. So that's why we're saying, I guess, why we are suggesting a combination of approaches. Like, don't just rely on things like gamification and prizes and competitions to build your email list, because that is a way to kind of like burn bright but burn shortly, whatever the phrase is. Other ways that you can actually go ahead and build your email list are things like personalized landing pages. So that is just a way of creating a landing page that has tailored messaging specific to that particular pet parent's interests or needs, and it just kind of very much connects the dots for pet parents in that regard, in that you can show exactly, by opting into my newsletter, I'm going to be talking to you about these topics. So it just, again, kind of makes it very relevant and something that they'd be like, because you're essentially being invited into that person's space. So, you know, they might be a bit kind of choosy with the newsletters they opt into, because they're like, I don't just want more emails clogging up my inbox. But with personalized landing pages, if you can show from the offset, I'm going to be talking about these topics, I'm going to be providing this value, it's going to be packed with this meaning, people are going to be like, oh, well, okay, I'll definitely want to opt in then, because why wouldn't I? It's something that I'm interested in, is going to improve my life, my dog or cat's or other pets' life. So again, it's just being able to be very specific with your messaging and just really kind of niche down, rather than, like we said before, being more generic, which I suppose kind of brings us neatly on to the next way that you can do it. And I know that you and I kind of like have had discussions about it in the past, Taryn, but pop-ups. I love kind of pop-ups. I love the effect that pop-ups can have.
Yes. But everybody, whenever I'm coaching a business owner on building their email list, and I suggest pop-ups, without fail, everybody hates them. They're like, I don't want to pop up on my website. I hate those things. Yeah. And I think we've just got to make it clear here that everybody hates pop-ups. Like, I don't, like, nobody wants something to disrupt them when they're in the middle of doing something. But the cold hard fact lies with that pop-ups work. That's why people do them, because they do disrupt you. They do disrupt what you're doing, and they get your attention. And especially if you've got a great hook there, like whether it's the great valuable bit of content or whether it's a discount or financial offer, they do work. So I think we're going to be living with them for a while longer yet. I can't see them going away anytime soon, I'm afraid.
No, well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, I don't think anybody truly loves pop-ups, but I love the kind of, I suppose, the psychology again behind pop-ups, in that, like you say, it is disruptive, but then it is so effective in just kind of gaining your attention. But I think the thing with pop-ups that people do get wrong is thinking that as soon as somebody lands on a website, a pop-up has to like really like appear aggressively in their face. And I think that's what, you know, kind of then falls into that trap of making it feel spammy or insincere or inauthentic to who you are as a pet brand or as an individual. But there's loads of options for pop-ups, and, you know, kind of most website hosting platforms do offer this kind of capability of having timers on pop-ups. So you can, you know, customize it so that it appears like 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes after somebody's like landed on a page. Or you can even have it as their mouse cursor is going to like exit the page, and you can have it pop up then to disrupt that behavior. But I think you can obviously experiment with it and just try different things. But I think maybe in that regard, have it at a setting that feels more kind of appropriate to you. Like maybe it is kind of 30 seconds after they've been on a page, or it's been when they've scrolled halfway down the page, just so it doesn't have that immediately like bam in their face, kind of like sign up to my newsletter list. And it's like, they haven't even had the opportunity to get to know you or engage with your website by that point. So I think that's, you know, kind of like a bit of a risky move, but maybe for some people it works. But I would suggest delaying it slightly in some capacity. And then kind of moving on to the next way that you can build your email list is actually having great content on your website already via blogs, which I love. I love blogs because they're just such an amazing way to, you know, like really position you as an expert or an authority in your field, but also to, again, showcase that value, showcase that you do know your stuff, you do want to be providing that education or information or, you know, kind of like tips and tricks to improve their life or their relationship with their pet, or, you know, kind of like maybe they've got like challenges as a pet parent that you can talk to. And I think it's a way of expanding the relationship beyond that kind of transactional kind of like, I want you to buy my product or service, join my email list so I can promote at you. By having kind of like very like a broad range of blogs that talk to a variety of different kind of very niche topics, I think again it shows that you do care about kind of the relationship more than it just being that kind of transactional, I just want to sell at you, I just want to promote at you. And you can even say like, you can repurpose blogs to use in your email marketing to have in there, just to be constantly providing that value. But, you know, also, again, demonstrating that, you know, if people like pet parents join your email list, they'll be able to access this future blog content so much more easily, and the value that you're offering to them. So again, I just like, you know, obviously blogs have that practical capacity of improving your SEO, your website visibility as well. So is a double winner, in my opinion, at least. So that then kind of brings us on to our last couple, which is social media. As we mentioned before, I've got a very kind of like mixed feelings about social media personally, but it's one of those things, it's like pop-ups. It does work in terms of the visibility of your brand and, you know, kind of interacting with your community. But they are like, whilst maybe interactions can be a bit more fleeting in comparison to something like email marketing, I think it is just important to, I suppose, recognize that they are such a great way to kind of cross promote things. So you can cross promote your newsletters on them, for example, and collect email addresses, or say you do kind of go through the gated content route and you want to kind of promote to your audience that you've got this amazing new guide available on your website. You can kind of then promote that on your social media, because people might not be looking at your website the entire time, but they might be more likely to come across a post on your social media advertising the fact. So again, I think it's a combination of approaches that work here. And then the last couple that I just want to quickly go through is a referral program, which is, you know, we're always going to trust a recommendation from, you know, kind of a friend, a family member, or another pet parent than a business kind of talking at us or promoting at us. So if you can set up, I suppose, like a scheme where people who refer kind of like friends and families to kind of join your list or even kind of purchase from you, they get some kind of reward or kickback for taking that action, then they're much more likely to, you know, kind of pass on that and be like, oh, kind of like, I know pet parents in my life and I really love you as a brand, so I can recommend you, but I can also be rewarded for, you know, that effort. It's again that incentive. But we're just much more likely to trust a recommendation, I think, from people we know in personal, like day-to-day life, as opposed to, you know, kind of business. Because of course a business is going to be like, my product or service is amazing, you should definitely like opt in to my newsletter. But it's like everyone's saying that, saying that, right? So if you've got a friend or family member going, actually no, this is true, this pet brand is great, you're of course going to trust that. And then that brings me on to my last way, which is the physical campaigning. So that might feel a bit kind of like cavemen, like everything is digital in this day and age, and that is true. But, you know, if you're attending events, you know, especially with Australia, you just like love, don't you, kind of like the dog show, cat show, pet show, pet of a pet show, you know, all the different variations.
Yeah, like we just had Dog Lovers show recently and stuff. And,
yeah, it's so popular.
Oh, yeah. There's so many these days. It's unbelievable. But it is a great, like you're saying, it's a great opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You can combine like physical sign-ups. You can have like a pen and paper kind of like write down your name and your email list, because some pet businesses find that's effective, because then you can actually chat to the people and begin to nurture that relationship at that point. But also don't forget that you can combine digital functionality with kind of in-person campaigning by, like, you know, having maybe a printed board with a QR code where people can just scan it with their phone's camera and be taken directly to a landing page to opt in to your email list. So again, like I said, it's kind of combining the best of both worlds in that regard. But I think just be careful, I suppose, in terms of the physical sign-ups, that you are still following data compliance and that you are kind of ensuring that you've got that permission to then email them, because that's where I think you could get into some sticky water. So just do your homework and make sure that you've read up on all the kind of things that you need to do to ensure that you check all those boxes.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying earlier, Erin, it's not about doing all of these things that you've suggested. It's about working out what aligns best with your own personal business, what you think will work with your audience, but then also try and test things. Like, I think quite often a scattergun approach is what business owners will do, rather than actually trying a strategy and then seeing, okay, what worked, breaking that strategy down into steps and going, what worked and what didn't, or what could I maybe tweak or try a little bit differently to get a greater result. None of us get amazing results first time off usually. It's usually try something, tweak it, try again, tweak it, try again. And it's, you know, it is about finding what works with your audience, because some strategies like Facebook groups or something like that to get in front of an audience and get some of that audience onto your email list works great for some businesses. But then for other businesses, it's more going out to those physical events. So It's just finding out what works for you, but you've given an amazing list of ideas there. So I'm sure there's plenty for people to try if they haven't already, with those on the list. So now that we've got an email list, we've got to keep those people engaged, don't we? And keep them actually wanting to receive content from us and open and click through to our emails. So what are your top tips on how to ensure that email list remains engaged with your emails?
Yeah, because that's the most important thing. We've been talking a lot about kind of generating that interest in your emails and getting people to opt in, but then comes the next step of actually keeping up that engagement and interest and not letting it just kind of die a slow death. So I think the first point that I do want to really, again, kind of emphasize is that it has to be valuable. It has to be packed with value, really. And it's something that we've talked about in previous episodes and blogged about on our website. But there are 4 types of value. If you're unsure of what value you can include in your emails, there's essentially 4 different categories that you can tap into. And if you can tap into one or more within each email, then it just ensures that you're not just sending emails for the sake of sending emails. You're actually sending something that is constructive in building and nurturing that relationship with your email list. So the 4 type of values, which I won't go into too much detail now, but we will include the link to this particular blog in the show notes, is functional, financial, psychological, or social. So as I said, if you can tap into one or more of those types of value in each email that you are sending your list, that is just going to ensure that you aren't essentially wasting your time or your email list's time, and that it is being kind of constructive and productive, like I said. And then another way to ensure that, your emails remain effective and productive in nurturing that relationship is, as we mentioned towards the beginning of this episode, is that segmenting your audience based on their behaviours or interests. Again, it will just ensure that what you're communicating is relevant and actually resonates with this specific audience, because rather than having a conversation that is completely irrelevant to someone, they're obviously going to switch off. And if that happens enough times, that's when you'll probably experience unsubscribes, because they're like, I know I'm not interested in this. Again, it's just kind of clogging up my inbox, so I'm just going to unsubscribe. But if you can segment your audience, it's just a way to, ensure, like I said, that your communication is relevant to that person. And then more on the design side of things is actually keeping the visuals of your email fresh. It's something that we found personally, something that we found with the pet brands that we personally work with, is that if you are you don't want to be constantly changing your visuals so that people get confused about your brand identity. But what we typically find is quite effective is having maybe a few templates just to hand that you can cycle through with, your fortnightly or monthly newsletters. Because if you're, as a kind of pet parent, if you're opening an email that looks exactly the same every single time, that's obviously going to get boring, and you might have the most incredible value in that email, but if kind of people open it and immediately it just looks exactly the same, of course they're going to switch off and become disinterested. So to prevent against emails becoming stale and boring is that just maybe every week or every other week, or depending on how frequently you're sending emails, just make sure to kind of vary the visuals slightly just to keep it interesting and eye-catching. And then kind of that brings me on to my next point, is nurture sequences. And it relates back to a point that we were talking about earlier in terms of the gated content side of things. In particular, example, maybe you have like a lead magnet that people exchange their details and their email address for. What you can then do is funnel them into a nurture sequence. So of course that initial email is going to be delivering access to that lead magnet or gated content, whatever it is. But then what you can essentially do is set up a sequence of automated emails that are strategically created to deepen that relationship, to tell them your brand story, to show them your value in different ways, and just to, I suppose, build upon that relationship in a way that is, again, kind of automated. So it doesn't mean you physically have to be creating these emails from scratch each time, but they just ultimately encourage pet parents to get to know, like, and trust your brand on that deeper level. And it's just a key mistake I see a lot of pet brands making, in that they have that initial kind of welcome email set up for whatever reason, whether it's gated content or just a usual welcome email for anybody who opts in. But then nothing follows up from that, and it's a bit of a tumbleweed moment. So, just to ensure that you've got that consistency and you're not losing out on that opportunity, it just makes sure that you've got at least that welcome sequence, nurture sequence in place, and then you can expand from there moving on. But on the flip side of this, you don't want to spam your list at the same time. So when it comes to things kind of like nurture sequences or, scheduling your emails, don't, as soon as people opt into your email list, begin like really heavily promoting and spamming them with emails like every single day. Like I've known some brands, not really pet brands, but I've known some brands to do this to me personally, and it just gives you that really icky feeling, when they're sending you an email like every single day going like, buy my product, buy my stuff, blah blah blah. It's just, again, it's inauthentic and insincere, and it's obviously just out to ultimately make a quick buck. So our recommendation would typically be to start off at a slower, steadier pace, but then if you've got promotions, then you can kind of ramp up the energy around those specific points of the year. But just don't immediately plunge into kind of that email marketing by just being very heavy-handed and very promo heavy with them, because it's just a very quick way to alienate your audience and, again, increase your unsubscribes.
Yeah, and I think it's when you're so spammy like that with sending regular emails to people, just going, buy my stuff, you're demonstrating that you just don't actually care about a long-term relationship. You're just after getting that quick sale. And I mean, we know from our own research and then from all the brands that we work with that, pet parents aren't looking to purchase from brands that they're just going to buy from once. They're looking to develop relationships. They want to have their favorite treat company. They want to have their favorite bed maker, and they want to stay loyal to those brands. They actually don't want to shop around. They want to find the best quality they possibly can for their pet. And then they want to stay loyal to that product and tell all their friends and family about it as well. So just remember that when you're building email marketing, especially automated sequences and things like that, that you're developing a long-term relationship. If you have that mindset when you're writing your copy, when you're designing the email, you're going to have far better results, because a lifetime of sales is going to far outweigh any immediate sales you could potentially get from being spammy. So I think it's really good advice, and it's every business, you just said, every business is different. So the timing between emails, the content of the emails is going to be different for every business. But overall, you've just got to have that certain approach, I think. So before we finish up, I mean, there is so much, so many ideas and tips for people here. But I think, and I'm hoping that anybody listening has a pen and paper, they've been writing down the things that they think would work well for their business. But before we go, Erin, can you just, is there anything else, any other general advice that you would want to give to pet brands out there around building their email list?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just when we were thinking about the discussion for this episode, there was just a couple of things that kind of popped into my brain where I was like, I just want people to, kind of take note of this, just because they're small functional things that can really, again, kind of impact, I suppose, the performance of your emails and, the success that you ultimately gain from that, whether that success is kind of deepening the relationship with pet parents, increasing the sales, increasing opt-ins, whatever that looks like to you. I think there's just a few things that just to keep in mind when you are going through this process of developing your emails, developing your strategies. So number one, first and foremost, is make your email opt-in super visible on your website in multiple places. Don't just rely on that pop-up, because like we said, people might click out of it. So you want to almost, again, kind of have a combination of having that pop-up on your website, but also having, we're kind of, I suppose, conditioned as a modern audience to look for embedded sign-up forms, and these are typically towards footer of the website. It can be in the middle of the page, but I'd recommend having it embedded into the footer of your website, in that, just, it doesn't have to be like a lengthy kind of call to action. It can literally just be like, sign up to my newsletter for the latest news, updates, and kind of great value. Ask for their kind of first name, last name, email address. Just have that embedded sign-up form in your footer or somewhere visible. Like I said, maybe, you just want to kind of try different places with that, but also give it a test run to ensure that it works properly, because, that's the thing. When we start working with a lot of pet brands, sometimes we'll just do like an audit of their website. And one of the first things we do is kind of test out their newsletter opt-in process. And sometimes you're like opt-in and it just doesn't lead anywhere, it just doesn't work. And you're like, well, there's your problem, it's not working. So, give it a test run. My next bit of advice is to actually promote user-generated content. So by this I mean content that is actually produced from your community, whether that is kind of photos of their kind of pet interacting with your product or your service, testimonials and reviews. And you can use it both in your emails or as a way to kind of promote signing up to your emails, because it just demonstrates how amazing it is to be a part of your community, and it implicitly nurtures that kind of that FOMO fear of like, oh, I want to be a part of that looks amazing, like all these other like pet parents love this pet brand or this product or service, I want to be a part of that. And again, it's kind of harking back to what we were talking about before, in that recommendation from a friend or family member is always going to be more effective than a brand telling you something about themselves. User generated content is just amazing at kind of positioning your brand as something that is reliable and trustworthy from the mouth of other pet parents, which kind of as customers we're much more likely to trust. The last couple of ways I'd recommend is create an account, especially if you're e-commerce and you've got that entire process of purchasing a product and then kind of checking it out. Most often you can kind of check out as a guest, so that means that you don't really need to create an account with that particular kind of website or pet brand. But if you encourage people to create an account at that stage of the journey with you, just so it's easier for them to log in next time, or maybe you do have another incentive, like an extra like 5% off if they do create an account, whatever you want to do with that. It just makes logical sense that if people are interested in your pet brand and do want to remain loyal and are interested in kind of like deepening that relationship, if you have that opportunity to actually create an account, and that's a natural way to then gather their information, their first name, last name and email address. So again, don't miss out on that opportunity. And then the last tip that I want to offer is also creating consistent communication, which is something I mentioned before, because I think the worst thing you can probably do is have like a flurry of activity, tumbleweed moments, flurry of activity, because it just, again, implicitly on a psychological level, I think it makes audiences feel unsafe. It's like, oh, I don't really know, you're not dependable, you're here and then you're not. So just create communication consistent, and whatever that looks like to you. Maybe it's fortnightly, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's just, kind of having these nurture sequences set up so that you aren't having to put all this effort into creating a newsletter every fortnight, but you do have a way to kind of stagger that communication in an automated fashion that does keep communication consistent. And in relation to that, also keep an eye on your analytics to see how your audience is responding to and potentially ignoring this email communication, because it does happen. People, you think you've created the best email in the world and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. So if you keep an eye on those analytics, it just means that you can continue to refine and tailor your strategy and content to be interesting, engaging and appealing.
Fantastic. And I think one of the good ideas that I've seen on websites is to encourage email opt-ins, is if you do have a great blog, educational blog area on your website and it gets a lot of traffic because you've really, spent a lot of time optimizing it for SEO, you can have like a series of blogs. So you might have a series of 2 or 3 blogs on a particular topic and make blog 1 available to the public on your website. And at the end of that first blog, have an email opt-in for them to receive the second and the third blog in that series. So you're giving them a taster, you're showing them the quality and the value that you have to offer. You're drawing them in with the first blog, but then, maybe for the more high value, whether it's maybe if you've got recipes for dog food or homemade dog food or something like that, you're then asking them for an email address to be able to access the next lot of content. So that's something that can work really well as well. And like Erin was saying, have multiple different opt-ins on your website. Don't just have a footer. Don't just have a pop-up. Have them in lots of different locations for different purposes, because what appeals to one person will be appeal differently to somebody else. So I think that's great. And yes, split testing. So with your analytics, so pretty much every email marketing system that's out there these days allows you to very quickly and easily split test things. Whether it's the sign up form that you've got on your website, you can have different pop-ups. So one might have a cute, funny image of a dog or something. Another one might have a different incentive. And you can test those things and see which ones get better opt-in rate for your audience. Same with your email content, trying different approaches and seeing what works well. So, gosh, there's a lot there for people to go and do. I don't think there's any shortage. So thank you so much,
Lots
Erin.
of homework.
Exactly. I think we could go on about this topic for days and days, but we wanted to make this episode very much especially for small businesses that are looking for new ways to generate a greater email list, but maybe, are doing it organically rather than spending big bucks on paid advertising or something like that. These are really good top tips from us on how to do that. And just pick a few, focus on them, and then come back to maybe this episode again in 3 months' time or something and listen to it again and think, well, what else could I do now? So thank you so much, Erin, for your time. And it's always a pleasure recording an episode with you. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on this episode today. We hope you are now able to go away with some great inspiration and ideas to implement into your business. Not only on how you can build your email list, but also why it is such a powerful tool. It allows you to engage with your audience and build meaningful relationships with them to develop long-term customer loyalty in a way that just isn't possible through social media on its own. And remember, your audience is 4 times more likely to purchase from you if they are receiving great email content from you as well as seeing you show up on their social media. As we mentioned, building an email list and strategies that you apply are unique to every business. No one way is a right way, so pick a couple of different strategies that appeal to you the most and try them out. Find what works best for you and then work to optimize that approach. If you would like our detailed guide on how to build an email list, just head on over to our website at petbizcreatives.com and sign up to receive our email newsletter, and we'll send you a downloadable copy of our guide. Also, remember, we are here to help, so don't hesitate to reach out if you would like some assistance with your email marketing strategies or even setting up your email marketing platform for you along with automated email sequences we mentioned in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so that you're notified when we release new episodes. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Pet Biz Project podcast, the show which helps you to build meaningful relationships with and sell more effectively to one of Australia's fastest growing consumer groups, pet parents. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review and tell us what your key takeaway was or what ideas you're going to go and implement into your own business. If you would like to get the show notes from today's episode or any of the links mentioned at all you need to do is head over to petbizcreatives.com/podcast. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter as well, where we'll let you know when the next episode is released and also share additional exclusive resources with you. Thanks for listening.